G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day. Now, there was no update yesterday as I was actually traveling for a video, but for the video I did put up yesterday of me landing a Boeing 737 plane, thank you for the response on that. And if you'd like to watch it, I'll also link that down below. Now, I'm going to have something new in the background of the videos. I was sent this off a friend of Instagram of a like a knitted bloody thing of me. So that's going to take place over here, because I think that is pretty bloody awesome. So what are we going to look at? Well, today we're going to have a look, of course, over the maps. We're going to have a look at the missiles launched into Crimea at Sevastopol, the damage that has caused, some new deployment of troops on the front line, and, of course, Putin and Kim Jong-un from North Korea and their meeting and what sort of went down there and what could be, I guess, the fallout from there. But realistically, I will say there's actually not that much movements on the front line, which I think is growing more and more concerning the closer we get to where that bad weather comes. The strikes deep into Crimea, the oil rig, things like this, yeah, it is all part of, I guess, a larger picture. But at the end of the day, that doesn't clear territory. The territory through the minefields, the soldiers on the front line is still going to move, and it is moving ever so slowly, especially in the past couple of days, and Russia deploying more troops and bringing more troops back as well. That it is definitely stagnating, that this counteroffensive sort of came up and did struggle, and now it seems to be back in that phase again. Maybe we will see more pushing, but it comes in waves of like a lot and then down, and I think it's just hitting that resistance of mines, the Russian defensive lines, things like this. But what we're going to look at first is that Ukraine has launched a number of Storm Shadow missiles from the UK into Crimea, and these have hit a Russian dry dock, which is a ship repair yard, and done a hell of a lot of damage. So let's have a look over, I guess, what came out when we first saw this. This is about 23 hours ago. Of course, this would have been in yesterday's, but I missed it due to being busy doing other stuff. So this is the sort of the late night footage we see here of back into the dry dock. Of course, these then are cranes and the fires here. Let's have a look a little bit further over what actual damage seemed to come out. So from the pictures we have, it does look like a Rapucha class ship, being this here, and a Kilo class submarine have been destroyed. So let's have a look through, and that is, so before and after. Now, we don't have much better than this, but definitely very heavy damage on that. And interestingly, it would actually be the first combat loss of a Russian or Soviet submarine since World War II. I do know this one's up in a dry dock, but it doesn't matter where it is. If it's now out of action, it's out of action. It has the same effect at the end. And these landing shift, we have seen multiple losses of these variant before, a lot of them, and there's been a lot even of those losses of is their ability to rebuild these ships. But I think more importantly in this is what is the damage to the repair yard. We know that is also very important. Now let's have a look a little bit more over this. So this is some of the footage that we saw as well of the strikes. So there's a little bit more floating around there, but that was one of the most clear ones that I've seen. So I guess the first photo that came out of some of the damage was this, and this of course looks down into then the dry dock repair yard, and people are saying, what is the damage? You can see the back gun of the ship here. We've got another better photo I'll show you, but like to these cranes, to the dry dock, what actually is damage? And you're going to have to like cut up, drag these ships out of there. That's going to be a lot too. So this actually breaks down off this photograph on the left. It superimposes like the boat in the water, I guess, over what it would look like. So you can actually get an idea of where it is. So of course this like ghosted out is just superimposed. So it talks about the superstructure's gone, where the mast collapsed, and lines up where the 57mm gun and rear mast, the actual damage to this, that it is very significant damage on this. But the actual photographs we have, they're not perfect yet, but we know there's been a hell of a lot. Now, Russia will say that they have intercepted 7 of the 10 missiles, but they will also claim these ships are just damaged. So God knows. And take it from someone who researches this war full time. When either side talk about interceptions of drones or missiles, unless there's like clear footage, just ease on the side of caution with how that is actually reported. But like I said, the big part of this, I don't think is the ships. It's actually the extent of the damage on then the dry dock. And if this is out of action for a long time, well, this is a critical piece of equipment for a working naval fleet. So we just have a few little things to look over in this as well. So, of course, the advisor to President Zelensky, Mikhailo Podolyak, has said then this: the demilitarization of the Russian Black Sea Fleet is a real long-term guarantee of security and regional trade routes and the grain corridor. This is the only correct response to Russia's attempts to turn hunger into a weapon, and the only way to ensure uninterrupted grain supplies to the countries of the East and Africa. So the way to do this is to build up the capacity of the armed forces of Ukraine, including expanding the range of weapons. We can already see the results of this in Sevastopol, a professional and meaningful statement, and of course the photograph below here. So they do, bring back into that hunger and how that has been weaponized. And hunger has just been, sanctions and hunger have just been absolutely weaponized. These are things which the UN will say they shouldn't weaponize. No one should weaponize, but it is of course being weaponized in all sorts of aspects. And you could draw conclusions on either side of the weaponization of things like this. So very interesting here as well from the spokesman about that we need more weapons to take out that Black Sea Fleet. We know Black Sea Fleet is very, very important to Putin. Let's have a look at where we're talking. So, of course, this is Crimea. Black Sea Fleet is down in Sevastopol here. We'll have a look exactly where this actually is. So this is then the dry dock here. Now, of course, this is an up-to-date photograph, but we have a submarine here and 2 ships here. So we zoom out, go way out. Next thing you're going to see bloody Earth. But this is, of course, Crimea. This is the Black Sea of Azov. But this is their warm water port. This is Russia's warm water port. The other ports, you're talking up in the north or in the far east, but they really need to maintain this. This is why Crimea is so important also to the Russians. We do know that Russia can use inland rivers, canals, and inland seas to get their ships into other areas as well to maintain, but it's significantly slower. And of course, being in the Sea of Azov could still be hit there as well. Now, let's then have a look at some Ukrainian officials' intelligence that have come out. There is damage to this ship repair plant in the city of Sevastopol, in particular to equipment. If we talk about watercraft, we can now confirm the defeat of a large landing ship and a submarine. So that was from RBC Ukraine, quoting then officials. And this is then what are they called? Rybar Russian sources then put up. So the same screenshots as what we're looking at, and the location that a Su-24M launched the missiles they're saying. So let's have a look here. At around 3 a.m. on September 13, Su-24M bombers of the Ukrainian Air Force launched 10 Storm Shadow Scalp missiles. So they're the same ones, just from France, one's from the UK, but they're the exact same every other way. Cruise missiles at Sevastopol. Now, it is said that these were Storm Shadows confirmed, at least the Guardian, whatever, reporting that it was Storm Shadows. Doesn't matter. Units of the 31st Air Force and Air Defence Division shot down 7 targets, 5 by Panzer S-1 surface-to-air missile system and 1 by S-400 Division. And the 7th missile was shot down by a MiG-31 fighter. Unfortunately, 3 Storm Shadow missiles reached their targets, the landing ship Minsk and the submarine Rostov-on-Don, which were in dry dock, sustained varying degrees of damage. And from those photographs, looks like very heavily damaged. It's going to be really dependent on where the damage is and what can actually Russia fix. Is it written off? Because everything, I guess, is repairable, but is it not worth then repairing? And there's been a lot of talks about this with the Rapucha class landing ships as well. Like, so Rapucha class is what we saw Ukrainian kamikaze drones hit as well. So, interesting. So, also, as expected, Putin and Kim Jong-un have met. So we're going to look over some of the footage down here. Now, where did they meet? Well, it is in the very far east of Russia. Let's zoom out a lot because Russia is an unbelievably big bloody country. Now we're going to come down in here. This is, of course, then Japan, North Korea, and we're just going to zoom in where North Korea and Russia sort of meet at this Vladivostok in here. So, of course, Kim Jong-un came by train. We're not actually 100% sure how Putin got there, but a long, long way from then the front lines. So, well, I don't need this map anymore. We're not going to go back. So this is then at their meeting, this translated video. One of the longest handshakes ever, I will say.
Спасибо, что на свою занятость пригласили нас и тепло приняли.
И очень рад вас видеть. Тем более, что такие события у вас были. 75 лет образования республики.
So, of course, 75 years since then, the Korean War.
70-летие победы в Великой войне за освобождение. 75 лет восстановления дипотношений. У нас столько событий.
한건 75돌도 맞이하고 지금 저도 시간이 지나면 로즈 그 위협 관계에서 전 75돌 맞이하게 됩니다.
So that is all I believe that I've got actually translated. So this meeting actually came only like a few hours after North Korea actually conducted another missile test. They fired 2 ballistic missiles out into the sea. And AP has reported that North Korea has used the distraction of the war in Ukraine to accelerate their own weapon development. Now, speaking at the Cosmodrome, Kim has said Russia has risen to a sacred fight to protect its sovereignty and security against the homogenic forces of the West. Mr. Kim has also told Putin, we will always support the decisions of President Putin and the Russian leadership, and we will be together in the fight against imperialism. So from the information we have, we know these meetings are about some support from Russia to North Korea to Russia, but we don't actually know any details on what agreements have been met, as officials have speculated a potential trade for ammunition for satellite and rocket technology. But later on, we're going to talk about why this may not actually be that. Now, Putin was asked if it will help North Korea build satellites, and Putin was quoted by Russian media as saying, "That's why we have come here." The DPRK leader shows keen interest in rocket technology. They are trying to develop space too. Now, some analysts believe North Korea could have very large stockpiles of arms, as it has not fought in a war since the Korean War, which ended in an armistice, of course, in 1953. So, very old stuff, but that'll still be usable, or at least some of it will be very usable, and large stockpiles, because unlike us, unlike Russia, unlike most countries, have fought in major wars since then as well, or at least conflicts as well. So, but I will say, like, say what you will about Putin, but I think there's even greater concern if Kim Jong got his hands on sort of the missile and nuclear tech that Russia actually possesses. Like, Putin's one thing, Kim Jong is completely just fucking off the chain. But there are skeptics to this. So Leif Erik Ensley, a professor at the Ewa Women's University in Seoul, has stated even a desperate war machine does not trade its military crown jewels for some old, dumb munitions. That is Putin getting ripped off in this trade for shells, bullets, some older shit, whatever they've got. You know, that stuff is still very important, but are you going to give up your crown jewels of your key space missile tech for that? And they don't believe so. So this has drawn many to actually think the likely outcome of this will actually be food to North Korea for his impoverished nation in trade for then these older munitions to come in. So this was the ISW's take on this then meeting situation. Russian President Vladimir Putin is likely concerned that Russia's growing relationship with North Korea may endanger Russia's existing sanctions evasion schemes. Putin met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un at this Cosmodrome in Amur Oblast on September the 14th. Putin called the meeting productive and reported that he and Kim had frank exchange of views on the situation in the region and on bilateral relations. Putin also stated that Russia continues to comply with restrictions on military technical cooperation with North Korea, but noted that within the framework of the current rules, there are opportunities. Putin is likely neutrally portraying his meeting with Kim in order to balance Russia's interest in acquiring North Korean artillery munitions with concerns about the risk of triggering secondary international sanctions on Russia due to potential trade with North Korea amidst increased international scrutiny of Russian sanctions evasion. So we do know Russia has ways to get around some of the sanctions. We see that with everything from bloody thermal shit through to bloody jean shops and Nike and Apple in Russia as well. You can still get an Apple 15 Pro if you really want in Russia. There's fucking stores there. So, you know, all the way through that as well. But of course, if they start going into North Korea, Russia's still part of the UN. Of course, there are more sanctions there. So it will be dependent. I think that goes into the statement we just read. Will you give up the crown jewels for these dumb munitions? Maybe there could be some other trade there. And of course, if Putin controls the media who's around that, of course, then if it's portrayed as neutral, well, then what can they really do? But there'd be a lot more information coming out through behind the scenes sources here. So Kim Jong has also invited Putin to North Korea, which is being reported that Putin has accepted. So we're going to look over some of the toasts made as well. So I'm not sure which one actually came first, but we're just going to watch both anyway. So this was Kim's toast to Putin. And I wonder if they tested like all those cups and stuff, because there are videos of Kim's like entourage wiping down his chair and checking it for like radiation and things like that, as we have seen Russia take out other people with like radioactive shit touching it as well. So let's have a look at then Putin's toast.
Хочу предложить тост за дальнейшее укрепление дружбы и сотрудничества между нашими странами, между Российской Федерацией и Корейской Народно-Демократической Республикой.
러시아 연방과 조선민주인민공화국 상무관계의 발전을 위하여
За благополучие и процветание наших народов.
우리 두 나라 인민들이 행복과 복리를 위하여
За здоровье товарища председателя и всех присутствующих.
존경하는 조선민주인민공화국 국무위원장 동지.
And that's what we have of that meeting. So we don't actually really know what is going on there. Now, of course, what we're going to do is we're going to have then a look at the maps. Of course, we have Ukraine, the center, the capital of Kyiv, the red areas occupied since 22, and the purple since 14. Of course, this is the areas of which Ukraine is trying to clear in their long-awaited counter-offensive. Now, we have talked about the Combined Arms Army, the CAA of Russia, being raised and deployed, well, going to be deployed into Russia, but the MOD updates tends to say a bit different. They're already in the fold. So elements of Russia's new 25th CAA have highly likely deployed to Ukraine for the first time. The formation is likely focused on the Luhansk Oblast in the northeast of the country. We have seen Russia have some gains over the past few weeks, if you follow me. As recently as August 23, recruitment adverts for the 25th CAA claimed it would only deploy to Ukraine from December 23. So that's what we were previously talking about. It is likely that units have been rushed into action early, partly because Russia continues to grapple with an overstretched force along the front and Ukraine continues its counteroffensive on 3 different axes. However, there is also a realistic possibility that Russia will attempt to use parts of the 25th CAA to regenerate an uncommitted reserve force in the theatre to provide commanders with more operational flexibility. So, saying here that Russia is, of course, stretched out across that front line. I think both sides are very stretched here, but they use them as a regenerated, uncommitted reserve. So a reserve force. This is what so many people have speculated about, is that these positions back here, how full actually are they? Are there reserve forces in here that can actually launch out into strikes or can man these areas? Maybe that's what the 25th is going to do, is like to bolster those positions, where in the first part, maybe they're trying to do these breakthroughs in the northeast, where Russia is having more success than in the south of the country, where Ukraine's having the most success, and a little bit over in the Bakhmut region as well. So, of course, then what we're going to do is we're going to jump actually into the maps and have a look. So, to the south of Kyiv, Robotyne front, the last 2 days, deep state map, haven't seen any change here at all, which is concerning as well, being this is where the central, like, main push is coming. But if we then jump onto the daily Ukraine map update, we only see a slight change over a few hours. So we actually see just this little bit here pop up. That this is why we talk about the fluid front line, that Russia got this little bit and then lost it. But before, it wasn't there either. So fluid up and down, but that was the only very small sort of forward and back in this area. So then let's have a look at the other maps and talk about this. So this little bit basically shows this. So it shows the same thing, that Russia had this bit and it's been taken back. This Surak says situation on Zap front. Ukraine army continue consolidating its position south of Robotyne. The advances are minimal due to the intense artillery activity of the Russian army. There's more arty in that area. Of course, Ukraine is trying to push down here into Novopolivka here too. Now, ISW shows, of course, very similar. It does show more captured, but does show just this area to the southwest of Robotyne itself. So same area we just spoke of down in here. Looks a little bit different on the maps, but said to clear that area and the trench systems here, pushing down, of course, into Novopolivka here as well. But no extra movement out to Verbove from there. And we have compared some of those maps. So no real movement around there. And if we push up past Ruzani, neither map shows any movement in here. Now, there is a lot of talk that Russia is pushing very hard in Mariinka at the moment, but I can't see any maps that show any movement there. So we're going to come up then to the south of then Avdiivka. Now, up in here, we have seen Ukraine clear, well, the green and the blue especially, because that's within a couple of weeks. We have seen this is where Ukraine have pushed the Russians back over the last couple of weeks. Let's have a look like that. That's what we've seen. But we do see a different picture in the last couple of days. We do see that Russia do take back a little bit of ground in Opitny. But then if we do have a look then on the daily Ukraine map update, so that looks very minimal on that map. Now, Uruzani, everything is the same across these two maps. We come up into, of course, Opitny, south of Avdiivka, same region. And then this looks more dramatic on this map. So there, and then pushes up. So I think where it both ends is the same, but it did say Ukraine took more, at least in grey zone. So we know that area is very fluid as well, coming back and forward. So next area we're going to push, of course, is into Bakhmut, where we have spoken that we're probably going to see a Bakhmut 2.0 at some point, although this is fairly flattened. In this area, we'll probably see a lot more fighting here. And what do we see on this map? No real shifts. We did see, of course, this, the correction across there, where we do know Russia and Ukraine are pushing very hard. Russia is pulling out of Klishkivka. Klishkivka is basically under full Ukrainian control. That it has pushed Russia back onto, of course, on the 12th, back in line with the railway, which we talked about from Suryak, and then Russia had a slight push across there, but no other real shifts there. But let's have a look. I should say as well, daily Ukraine map update doesn't show any movement there. So let's have a look over some different maps in this region. So we'll first look then, let's look at, of course, this one from Suryak. Situation south of Bakhmut. Russian army launched a counterattack and improved its position southeast of Klishkivka. On the other hand, troops withdrew to the railway in the northern part of the locality. Moreover, Ukrainian army is facing difficulties to consolidate its positions in the central part of the town while they are not able to advance to the remaining part of its control. So Ukraine is struggling to get, I guess, a foothold in the middle of the town to keep advancing through there. So there's a lot of grey zone here. So like we see on these maps, Russia did pull back over the train line here as well. This eastern part of the train line is still under Russian control, but it's said to have made back this paddock area in here as well. So consolidating on the side, there was a push in there. But none of the other maps really actually show this. But the Rybar Russian sources also show very similar to this. So this is Klishkivka, and then we're talking on the east. Now, Rybar show a lot more because this is it here then in the dark red is what the gain was to be. But it doesn't show that the Russian forces have pulled back to the train line there. So if we do bring this up, so this is then, of course, the same area up here as up here. This is the train line, and it's saying that Russia hasn't pulled back onto that train line, but they've made a lot of ground on the north and the east here too. So this is why we use multiple sources. It's probably 50% in here, like in somewhere. And then let's have a look at then what the ISW show of today and Klishkivka then 3 days ago. So the blue bit that was taken on that third day, and down Kurtumivka doesn't show any changes, doesn't show really any in Avdiivka or in Klishkivka. I think that the push in of that grey zone is showing the same amount. It's not showing the complete control like some of the other maps. So interesting that ISW is a bit more conservative on the Ukrainian gain there than a lot of the other maps. And maps do have, areas where they are more or less conservative, just depending, like Deep State, they just never picked up the crossings of the Dnipro down in the west of the country. Now, going to push up then into Soledar, so north then of Bakhmut, in and around this Rozdolivka here as well, where we do know Ukraine then had an advancement. So let's read this. A situation north of Soledar. During the last days, Ukrainian army managed to expand the buffer zone around the town of Rozdolivka by advancing along the railway, and recent bombardment of Russian army in the area allowed us to modify the map. So this isn't the easiest to actually see. So this is Rozdolivka. This is, of course, then Rozdolivka here. Now, what we do need to look for is see just this bit where this waterway comes out here, but it comes into like a small dam bit here. This is the same area. So then we see this turn. This is the turn. So it is saying that Ukraine managed to make this grey zone then into controlled territory, well, at least into more buffer zone, and the Russians have had to pull back somewhere to the corner of this paddock. So just on the corner of this paddock through to here, so across there somewhere. So increase the buffer zone like the Rybar sources have said there, but doesn't show either. Now, one thing I did forget, I just need to pull back down to the south into Bakhmut. Of course, clearly we're talking is we're going to talk about Berkivka. Now, we did know Surak maps did talk that Russia did make back some ground in Berkivka, but the other maps didn't show it yet. Well, this has been then caught up. So if we step back to the last time I spoke to you was the 12th to the 13th, we do see that Russia did make an advancement to the north of Bakhmut and capture some positions and some ground in there too. Now, the last part we're going to talk about is up in the northeast of the country where, of course, it is being spoken about the CAA could be deployed and where we're seeing Russia have some push too. And, of course, part of the game plan here, both countries are trying to draw other forces around. So Russia's trying to draw Ukraine away from the south, having success up to here, and vice versa, that Ukraine is trying to draw Russian forces down from this region so they don't have a breakthrough as well. So that we're going to talk about is up here, Vilshana and this Sinkivka region. Of course, the main objective here is going to be trying to get Kupiansk. So let's have a look at what is going on here. I say Daily Ukraine Map Update, ISW and the Deep State don't show any change here, but you have then Syriac maps. The situation northeastern front. While the situation around Sinkivka hasn't changed much, some corrections were made following video footage and geolocations. Russian army made some advances in the forest area of Liman Pershi. So, of course, we have Sinkivka, Liman Pershi, and this area up in here, which, of course, in this map is shown under control by the Deep State too. So, showing that there's actually maybe more control in the Deep State here, but maybe less in some areas to then the east of Liman Pershi as well, depending on what then the Syriac will show. So very interesting, and this is why we take multiple accounts in. But last couple of days, last 48, 72 hours, very, very minimal changes. A lot of those changes were corrections of new footage that has been released, and we can talk about the problems in this slow advancement. It raises a lot of questions, doubts, things like this. But we will see where this ends up in 30 to 40 days. We will see where this is actually going to end up. I think we'll get more scope on how the offensive actually has gone. So far, not that great, but it's definitely not over yet. But like Jeremiah said, 30 to 45 days was his thing. That was 4 days ago. So somewhere in 26 to 41 days, we'll get, I guess, a new scope on where this has gone and where this will go then into next year. But Legends, thank you very much for your support. If you'd like to support me further, links down below, but never feel obliged. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.